Several months ago, I was at St. Columba's, and after Father Aiden gave a short little introduction, you know, the preach part, and the preacher from a Baptist church here in Oakland. And the woman stood up and she said, I went to the Holy Land and I expected to see shrines and stones that would speak to me. But boy, did she see something different. She came back and she said, I realized that Israel learned about the Jim Crow laws from the United States. I was riveted. The streets of Oakland, paralleling in some way what is going on in Gaza, in the West Bank, in the Holy Land. I sat there and I said, oh, the leadership team, and there are many of us, have chosen the theme building bridges. I bet this woman could help build a bridge between Palestine and the East Bay. So we invited her to come and speak with us. I don't know much about Allison, but I know that for over 25 years, she has been the pastor of Public Witness. Oh, aren't we all called to be public witness? She's the pastor of Public Witness, which means she's a pastor, she's an educator, and she's an activist. And she has been working for a number of years around this kind of connection with Palestine. But before I go into that, I want to say, while I was like looking around what to introduce her 16th, oh, there was a quote by Allison Tanner, not only a quote, but she had been there at pre-dawn before the U.S. federal immigration law, and she and 47 other faith leaders had chained themselves to the doors so they couldn't get in. And what she said is, the goal is to shut this building down for this day, she said. And the Department of Homeland Security arrested and zip-tied them one by one and chained to the door. But they were successful. By 11 a.m., the signs read entrances. The asylum seekers, though, would wait in line for their appointment, were told to reschedule and come back tomorrow. So this is a woman with her boots on the ground. So Allison, I believe, has seen a strong connection between immigration and between her work in coordinator of the Apartheid Free Initiative, which was convened by the American Friends Service. It's an interdenominational coalition of faith groups that are encouraging people to step away from any in support of Israel apartheid, occupation, and settler colonization. What I think is marvelous, which was just called to my attention, this is also the month of interchurch work, right? Christian unity. So, Baptist pastor, minister, reverend with us. You are a trailblazer in so many ways. May you be a trailblazer among the Catholic Church, too.
Thank you, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. It is good to meet some friends, some colleagues, get to know many new faces. It's good to be here to share with you some of what I've experienced, some of what I've seen, and some of what I have been asked, indeed implored, to share with others. Particularly to the Christian invitation to the larger church is come and see. Come and see what is happening. And then once you come and see, go and tell. Go and tell what you've experienced. So thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity to go and tell as I've been asked to do. Traveled to Bethlehem. I spent most of my time in Bethlehem. It was my 6th trip to the Holy Land and my 6th trip in about 8 years because the first trip kind of pulled me in and got me coming back, going deeper and deeper into the work. But this was the first trip. No, I went last year when rockets were flying up in Lebanon and we had to stay in the south. So I wasn't worried about myself. But this was, I had trepidation because I knew that what I was going to see was going to be worse than what I'd experienced each of the other trips. And indeed, each of the other trips, every time I go, I can see conditions. And so I knew when I went, it would be heavy and it would be hard. So I want to share with you some of the heavy and some of the hard, and indeed some of the hope. In the past 2 years, 2+ majority of the attention Palestine being on Gaza, what we don't see is what's happening in the West Bank, which folks in the West Bank consider a silent genocide. There has been, specifically in the past 2 years, an intensification of attacks, strategic isolation of land, the choking of livelihoods, the destruction of property, and the overall rapid deterioration of the ability of one to live freely in one's land. And so here, we've been watching the destruction of Gaza. But what we don't always see is in the West Bank, the amount of weapons center. Right, all the tear gas canisters that got collected, and when I walked by this structure, all I could think of was what strange fruit, right? The last time I went to the West Bank, last November, a year ago, was 1 year on Gaza. And I'll give you a few photos because I'm going to talk today a lot about theology, but I wanted to give you a few photos. Last year, I summarized my trip and the ensuing experiences of folks in the West Bank since the October 7th attacks in 3 words: gates, pacification of the West Bank. Just one gate that was put up since October 7th. There are now nearly 900, I think 898 gates that have been put up since October 7th. And the gates serve as an additional piece of structural control of movement in that Israel at any time can close a gate. And I dare say every village and city has enough gates around it that Israel can close off every single one to prevent movement. And so take Bethlehem, for example, this small village. Like this, the gates of Bethlehem can be closed so that Bethlehem is an enclave and you can't get out. And not only creates the conditions to completely isolate Bethlehem, so that what's to prevent what happened in Gaza from happening in Bethlehem, if they are that isolated and that cut off from any ability to not only move but escape from a harm. And the amount of the amount of hours in which people have because of these gates, and often, even last year, when a gate would be closed, so we'd spend another half an hour going another way, and that gate would be closed, and we'd spend another hour finding one open gate so we could get back to our hotel, and that was just one experience of the amount of restricted movement that has greatly intensified since October 7th. You can see the building of new walls. You can see settlers. They're somewhat indistinguishable from the soldiers, mostly because they were given uniforms and they were given guns so that they could function as soldiers, right? And so this was a bunch of settlers telling us at one point, yeah, you're not allowed to go to this village. They have no authority to tell us that, except they have guns, so we obeyed. And leaving the town through that gate, they wanted to make us leave through a gate that would require 3 miles of walking, even though less than 100 yards away, our taxi was waiting for us. And so we stood at the gate for about 3 hours until they finally gave us, escorted us through a way in which we only had to walk 1 mile to get to us. Guns. And then in this corner over here, this is a picture of Gaza 2024, so over a year into the genocide that's taking place. You can see the smoldering of bombs that had fallen that day. I was eager to get as close as I could to Gaza after the bombing and the starvation, just to feel close. But when our tour bus went there, it turns out there's an overlook where you can climb a little hill and look out and see what's happening in Gaza. And that particular day, there was a school bus with a bunch of, I don't know if they were out there for a field trip, so that they could come to this overlook, pumping their fist. Yeah, this is what our country is doing. And you could see them looking through an observation, those little binocular things, so that they could be seeing the harm that was taking place. And they were singing and they were laughing and they were cheering. And I realized this is how it keeps happening. This such dehumanization on other people, so that people can affirm their country engaging in these ways. Cling to, because I also saw it on that trip, and this is just a 30-foot wall that separates the borders, and written on the wall was, "It's getting worse," and I'd seen that last year. But then also what is written on the wall right underneath it, which was a testament to Palestinian hope, perseverance, resistance, resilience, and sumud, is, "Forget not the tyranny of this wall that made it fall." So there was still this insistence that this wall will fall. And even as things are getting worse, freedom will come. And that hope is stunning, it's stirring, it's inspirational, and it's a reflection of survival. This year, and saw things worse than I did last year, the Palestinian tour guides that I worked with wanted to make very clear that everything that is happening right now is familiar. Everything that is happening has been happening for decades. But the rapidity, the rapidness through which homes are being demolished is being restricted, through which villages are being strangulated and depopulated. All that has sped up, and could speed up because the structure was already in place. And so what vacation is an ongoing, but it's getting worse and worse, such that there's this feeling like it can't keep going this way without the Palestinian people being completely and utterly ethnically cleansed from the area. That's the direction in which we're going. So this was the context I was walking in. But I also felt that there was a call from Palestinian Christian leadership to the international church to say, "Come, stand with us, work with us. We feel really alone, and especially really alone by the church, abandoned, working hard, and who are in solidarity." And so I went. And I don't know if any of you know Kairos, Palestine. Have any of you heard of Kairos, Palestine? So 16 years ago, Palestinian Christians got together and wrote really a modern-day epistle in the tradition of Paul, of Kairos, South Africa, tradition of Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail, written specifically to the white Christian moderate. And it's a document that says, our situation is dire. Our theology tells us that God longs to liberate us, and we need you, the church, to help make that happen. 16 years since this document was written, so actually in the past year it was written, Kairos 2, and that document is the one that I want to talk to you now about. It's called A Moment of Truth, Faith in the Time of Genocide. And you can find the document, it's about 14 pages if you print it out, on their website, kairospalestine.ps, and I'll be giving you websites. But it's a document that much like the first document, was rooted in what does it mean to have faith when you live surrounded by empire? What does it mean to have hope when you live surrounded by hopeless conditions? And what does it mean? And this document that was written, and it was written to it was written to galvanize. It was written with the recognition that after 16 years, this first document, it still stands. Everything in it is solid, is true, is accurate, and we are in a quantitatively different moment 2 years after an ongoing just stopped. 2 years of escalated violence in the West Bank with the world watching and not sufficiently intervening. How can the international church come together, see what is happening, hear from us, and then work together to incarnate? Moving out of the Christmas season of incarnation, God coming into human flesh. How can the God of liberation be incarnated in our midst, in our world today? And how can we, as the international church, help make that happen? So this November, the second document was launched. And the gist of the document is simply this. We want to live in peace on our land. We want to live in peace with our families. We want to live in peace in our villages, in our communities. We want to live in peace with all the inhabitants of the land. But to live in peace means the attacks must stop. It means the raids and the killings must stop, the forced displacement must stop, the apartheid conditions, the military occupation, the restriction of movement, and the control of every aspect of our lives must stop. Moreover, Israel must be held accountable for its war crimes, and reparations must be made. And that's the gist of this document. Building on Kairos 1, it offers a clear analysis of Palestinian suffering, and specifically its root causes: settler colonialism, genocide, apartheid, based on definitions put forth by international law. It insists on a theology that's rooted in justice, love, and God's presence with and for oppressed peoples, and it demands responsibility from the church. What needs done, how to do it effectively, and how to do it in a way that avoids causing harm. And so you can see here, and this is just the very opening paragraph, Kairos Palestine. We look toward a day when we shall live free in our land, together with all the inhabitants of the earth, in true peace and reconciliation, founded upon justice and equality for all God's creation, where mercy and truth meet, and righteousness and peace kiss each other. In this document, and I just read this, but let me give you a visual of it. There are three main parts: the reality, what is happening on the ground, genocide, colonization, and ethnic cleansing, a moment of truth. And this word kairos, it's a Greek word. How many of you know the word kairos? It's a Greek word for time, but a special time separate from chronos, where we get the word chronology, and that's kind of the historic unfolding of time. But kairos is a special moment in time where God shows up and decisively acts. And so when we look at the Exodus story, there was a kairos moment when God heard the cries of the oppressed and brought forth Moses as a leader and Miriam, and led the people from the wilderness into freedom and liberation. Led people into the wilderness and then from the wilderness. Kairos, when Jesus came, there was a Kairos moment when God acts in a decisive and unique way in the midst of history. And they're saying this is a Kairos moment for us, and this is a moment of truth. A context of the international church to say, are you willing to be the church with and for us? Are you willing to help us? And then there's a section, a call to repentance and action. What does it mean to be the church? And then finally, they write that in the midst of all that is happening, we choose to continue to believe in God. We choose to continue to have faith even in the face of genocide. And so I want to read you a few words from the document. From the land of the incarnation, the land of the cross and the resurrection, we renew our word of hope in the God of the poor, the oppressed, and the downtrodden. The genocidal war has sought to strip us of our hope and faith in God's goodness and life on our land, yet we declare our adherence to a faith in a holy and just God, and in the right God has given us to live with dignity on the land, on our land and the land of our ancestors. This is our hope, this is our steadfastness, this is our resistance. Our aim is to live as sons and daughters of God in our homeland without barriers, walls, military occupation, and apartheid, but in a world where justice, fairness, and equality rule. We envision a future. They see a future. We envision a future in which our world is free of war, death, sectarianism, and tribalism, where the word of truth rises above the word of power, where legitimacy belongs to peace and justice. We draw our hope from the word of God and from the faith alive in our hearts, refusing to leave the shaping of our future to the voices of extremism, colonialism, and supremacy. And here's a confession. I go to Palestine to be in solidarity with Palestinians. But I also go to Palestine to learn how to live in this country as a person of faith. As we watch our freedoms unravel. It's hard to have hope these days, especially if you do your due diligence and listen to the news on a daily basis, right? And yet I feel like if Palestinians have found a way to live with hope and to have faith in God, there's a lot we can learn from them. There's a lot we can do to support them. And there's a lot that they have to teach us. And so I highly recommend this document, Kairos 2, not only as an invitation to listen to, engage with, and respond to Palestinian Christians, but also as a way to help us figure out how we're going to make it through today and this next year, and Lord willing, only 3 more. So what I want to do now is I want to go through the 3 parts of this document. On the ground realities, which I've talked a little bit about, theology, what our faith can ground us in this moment, and then the role and responsibility of the church. And the first thing I want to show you, because I can tell you what I saw, but far better than that is for you to hear Palestinians telling you their own stories. I want to highlight, it's a 15-minute video, so we're not going to watch it now, but I will give it to you on a handout, and I encourage you to watch it. It's called The Silent Genocide. It was created by Kairos Palestine, a documentary in which they're able to tell their own story about how life has changed in the past 2 years, and the story of Palestinian Christians who are living with the very real threat that there may indigenous Christian presence in the land that birthed Christianity. And when I first met with Palestinian Christians in 2018, they had talked about how the Christians, indigenous Christians, Palestinian Christians were 4% of the population. And by 2019, it was down to 2%. And it is now down to 1% because the conditions are so hard that people are leaving if they can, or what's more realistically taking place, the young people are leaving. because there is no future, because there is no job. They're able to get educated, and they aren't able to provide for themselves. So there's this real fear. What does it mean to have a holy land without any indigenous Christians who can trace their roots back through the millennia? And at this point, I want to be clear that I went to hear from Palestinian Christians because I wanted to hear what life is like for Palestinians. And I met with a lot of Palestinian Christians. I met with a lot of Palestinian Muslims. I met with even a few, at least, if not Palestinian, Arabic Jews in the area. And what I heard from all of them, especially the Palestinian Christians, is don't consider us Christian first and then Palestinian. Consider us Palestinian, with a recognition that our faith is Christianity and our neighbor's faith is Islam. And historically, we had neighbors of the Jewish faith, and all of us have lived together on this land in peace for the vast majority of its existence. That's not the case right now. That has been the case. And so I want to talk to you about what I heard from Palestinian Christians, but I want to be very clear that Palestinian Christians don't have a more important message than non-Christian Palestinians, but because of our faith tradition, we have a shared theology. We have a shared faith, and that holds for us some specific responsibilities. So I want to name that even as I'm speaking as a Christian to Christians about Palestinian Christians. I'm also speaking just as importantly about the situation for all Palestinians. To best understand what's happening right now, and some of you may have seen this image, but it really depicts well the settler colonial project that's taking place. And I want to note that Jewish settlements began long before the creation of Israel. In fact, in the late 1800s, the first Jewish settlements were beginning to be, the land was beginning to be taken over for the creation of Jewish settlements. You can see in the UN plan for how much land was going to be taken over for the creation of Israel. You see the actual amount of land that was taken over, and then you see in 2005 this ongoing trajectory. I find this map very useful when we're trying to understand what's happening in Gaza specifically, because you can see all of Gaza being white, right? You can see the trajectory and how everything that's happened in the past 2.5 years fits into this trajectory. And in fact, Gaza, because of the yellow line, because of the amount of land that Israel has forbidden Palestinians to live in, more than half of it is gone. 63% of what we're looking at right there, Gazans cannot exist in, cannot live in, but cannot travel to, and will be shot dead if they enter. So we're seeing this, and it also helps us see all that's happening in the West Bank, the silent genocide, and where it's coming from. Again, the roots of what's happening have been there for a very long time. And before I go too far down this road, I want to be very clear that what's happening in Israel is a very familiar story. A very familiar story. A story that our country has been engaged in for a whole lot than the country of Israel. And a story that we continue to have responsibility to do the work that we can to allow the indigenous people in this land to continue to live safely, to not be forcibly moved to not be forcibly harmed by state violence. What Jean mentioned, the connections to Jim Crow apartheid when we look at apartheid Israel. But it's not just apartheid that parallels and unites our two countries. It's also settler colonialism, and indeed the apartheid structure is in Israel in service to the settler colonial project. This is the reality. And this is the ask of Palestinians. Please do not talk about our situation as a conflict. Talk about it as a colonial project. Of course there's a conflict because of the settler colonial project, which is the root cause of the conflict. And so it's not about ceasefires. It's not about let's not have any more settlements. It's about let's stop the settler colonial project. The second part of the document that I want to talk about is the role of faith. What does Christianity have to offer Palestinian Christians who are enduring this right now? And so I want to give you this image as an image of what it means or what it can mean to live with hope amidst conditions of destruction and devastation. Here you see, remember the tree of tear gas canisters? Here you see a woman taking those canisters and forcing them to be vehicles of life, or forcing life to come despite what they were originally intended for. And I shared with you already a little bit about what faith looks like for Palestinians. This is just a visual of that. The ability to say, we know we belong here. We're not the only people that our existence will be in service to life. That's really powerful. It's more than that. Stone comes from a place called Tent of Nations, where a Palestinian Christian, Dawood Nasser, and family have created on their family land a place in which they long to create a self-sustaining eco-environment that allows them to live life separated from the harms that are all around them. And at the entrance, and it's a little fuzzy, sorry about that, but at the entrance, written in 3 languages, are the words, "We refuse to be enemies." And in the first Kairos document, there was this emphasis on with love as our logic. With love as our logic. We refuse to be subjugated, we refuse to be dehumanized, and we refuse to dehumanize those who are oppressing us. Yeah. Wow. And so at this Tent of Nations, there are 4 principles that people live by. We refuse to hate. Why? Because hate will consume us. It's a very self-serving strategy. We refuse to hate because we don't want to be consumed by hate. We refuse to be victims. We have to use whatever agency we have, limited though it is. And on this farm, it's great. Israel has been trying to take over this land for decades. Since the 80s, they have been in litigation. I think something like $30,000 $30 million has been raised internationally to help with the legal fees. And Israel has basically said, you cannot build anything on your property you don't have permission to. So they started digging and building underground. Israel has said, you can't use electricity. So they brought in solar panels. I mean, they have their own cisterns. They're seeking to be self-sustaining in the midst of the attacks on their livelihood and their community and their land because they refuse to be victims. The third principle, we believe in faith. We refuse to let go of our faith, and in this case, our Christian faith that demands that God is a God of love, and that love will see us through. That love will be our salvation. And four, we believe in justice. And we believe that God is a God of justice. And if God is a God of justice, then God understands what we're going through. And God wants our justice even more than we want it. And that when we read Scripture, we hear that God has a special place in God's heart for those who have been unjustly treated, whether it's the widow, whether it's the orphan, whether it's the poor, whether it's the Palestinian. And this is why, if you've heard from Reverend Munther Isaac, he talks about how God is in the rubble of Gaza. And he knows that because he was a pastor in Bethlehem, and he knew that God was born on our side of the wall. And so if God is a God of justice, if God entered humanity siding with the oppressed, willing to be poor, then they know that God has not abandoned them. It does raise the question, what about the church, though? And so this is where the third piece of the document talks very specifically about a call to repentance responsibility. And I want to give you just a few cliff notes from the document, a summary that was given by the authors of the document. What are the responsibilities of the church in this moment with all that is going on? And so basically, there are 5 ways in which the church, the international church, is asked very specifically to advocate for Palestine. Okay? They spell it out. They make it very clear. 1, we need you to clearly name our condition. Use the terms genocide, settler colonialism, and apartheid. Acknowledge that there is international law and that we need to use it. 2nd, I got ahead of myself. Advocate for accountability and international law. Okay? We have the tools to hold Israel legally accountable. Now, the U.S. isn't going to do it. Our politicians certainly aren't going to do it. But can we, as a church, use our moral voice to demand this to be so? Because we have power. Maybe not power to change our current administration's mind, but we have power to say what is happening is wrong. And we have power to say we do not want to cooperate. We do not want to be complicit. And we have power to say Israel must be held accountable. 3, reject and expose theologies that justify oppression. And this includes any form of Zionism, certainly Christian Zionism, Jewish Zionism, Muslim Zionism, but as a primarily Christian community, let's talk about Christian Zionism and the ways in which it is funding, supporting, providing legitimation and theological cover, if not actually amplifying the harm that's being done. We must reject and expose such theologies. We must practice costly solidarity through public, active engagement. And we are asked to support creative, nonviolent resistance, including boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. Okay? These are tangible ways in which we can do something, and I'll talk a little bit more about what they might look like. But also there are 5 things that we are asked not to do. We are asked, 1, to avoid any type of both sides framing that conflates the oppressor and the oppressed. Yes, the goal is for everyone to live freely in the land, and for that to happen, the oppressed need to be freed of their oppression, justice needs to be happen, so that then we can find a way to move forward. 2, do not promote dialogue without justice. So don't engage in a let's hear from both sides without acknowledging what side has been silenced and will continue to be silenced politically, in our media, in our churches. 3, do not spiritualize or depoliticize the struggle, reducing it to a quote-unquote religious issue. This is a settler colonial project. This is a political issue. We have to be able to see that mass piece of it that has co-opted religion for its purposes, much like manifest destiny, the doctrine of discovery. I mean, we did this our history is rife with examples of how to do this and how to do this effectively, unfortunately, which is why we have a responsibility to work to undo it. Do not accept or promote solutions that don't include justice, and do not remain silent or passive in the face of genocide. We may not be able to stop the genocide, but we must never cease trying it, from challenging it, from saying it is wrong. At the end of the document, I was asked to give a response to the document. I was representing the United States region, and then I had colleagues representing Canada, Europe, South Africa, Asia, and South America. And my response was simply this: thank you. Thank you for telling us what we need to do. Thank you for making it so clear, and thank you for inviting us to actually do the work of being the church. Because I'm convinced, as a follower of Jesus, that God is a God of liberation and that we are called to help do that work in our time and in our day. And this document helps us figure out how we can do that, what we can do. I also said thank you for inviting us to join you in the work of birthing new iterations of our faith, for claiming that, yes, our faith demands justice and roots ourselves in love. And again, these are key tools that I dare say are essential in this moment in time in this country. And so we have them at our disposal. This gives you a feel of the international community that came. We represented over 20 different countries coming to respond and then going back to our own communities. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what ways in which we can live out this specific call, but first let me give you, I just want to say briefly, the first time I went to Palestine, and Jean mentioned, I didn't know what I was getting into. You know, that's what they say, you know, like the danger of the Spirit touching your soul. It can change things. I went in 2017 because I was working on immigration justice. I went with Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity. Some of you know them. I went representing them and representing NorCal Sabeel. And I went on what was called a wall-to-wall delegation. The delegation took 5 people from the United States and 5 people from Mexico who were actively working to challenge the U.S.-Mexico wall, to come and meet and learn from Palestinian and Israeli activists that are working to challenge Israel's apartheid wall. And it was in this context that I learned what was happening. And it was in this context that I learned the deep connections between what is happening to Palestinians and what is happening to people of color in my country. And it was this context in which I learned to see with new eyes not just the second-class citizenship, but the third and the fourth-class citizens. And when I saw the caste system and how it manifested in Israel, it opened my eyes to see it more fully how it manifests in this country. And so even as I need to do what I can to work toward Palestinian liberation, it is never exclusively Palestinian liberation. It is always the liberation collectively of all people, in which case in my country, I am the one of mass amounts of privilege. I am the one that has to learn how to see the ways in which I have been taught to dehumanize. And I have to do the work of undoing so that we can be working toward the liberation of all. Palestine document. It calls us, it invites us to have the faith to believe that the situations of death and destruction all around us can be transformed. And it calls us to have the courage and commitment to take action to do our part. In the words of our Palestinian Christian partners, we still believe that faith can move mountains, truth can speak to power, love can rise from the ashes of genocide, but for this to happen, we're going to need your help. And so in my last few minutes, I want to give you a few ways in which I want you to think about things that you can do to respond to these 5 ways to advocate and these 5 ways to avoid. The first is I want to share, I am the national organizer for Apartheid-Free Communities. Apartheid-Free Communities is a network of over 1,000 communities, including congregations and faith communities, but also including businesses and solidarity groups, artist groups, unions, campus groups. We have 8 municipalities and 1 university who have all come together to take a very, very simple pledge that names Israeli apartheid. Remember that first thing we're supposed to do? Name apartheid, genocide, settler colonialism. Names Israeli apartheid, pledges to take action, and we figure out for ourselves what that action looks like, and become a part of a larger network to take action. And I want to give a shout out right now to the folks of St. Columba, the folks of Newman Hall Nonviolent Peacemaking Group of Holy Spirit Parish, Emmaus Faith Community, Pax Christi, Northern California, NorCal Sabile, Women in Black Berkeley, JVP Bay Area, in all being parts of communities that have taken this pledge. Here's the very simple pledge, and I don't know the process of women in conversation about making decisions, but you absolutely are a community that could consider taking this pledge and joining the network. Here's the pledge. We affirm our commitment to freedom, justice, and equality for the Palestinian people and all people. We oppose all forms of racism, bigotry, discrimination, and oppression. We declare ourselves an apartheid-free community, and to that end, we pledge to join others in working to end all support to Israel's apartheid regime, settler colonialism, and military occupation. And I encourage you to go to our website, apartheid-free.org, to see the list of over 1,000 communities who've signed, to find resources to further educate your community in understanding what's happening, and to look at our list of ways to consider taking action in very tangible ways. The other piece I want to share with you is I am a local faith leader for a group called Interfaith for Palestine. Some of you know us. We've done Gaza pilgrimages. We did a 22-mile Gaza pilgrimage in both 2024 and 2025, and we're working as an interfaith network with 3 campaigns that we are encouraging folks to get involved in. And again, I will give you all these websites, but on the Interfaith for Palestine website, there are ways to learn about and support the ethical investment policy in Alameda County. I don't know if you know, Alameda County has passed one of the most progressive, ethical, and comprehensive ethical investment policies of any county in the entire country. A huge amount of work was done to get to this point. Unfortunately, they're not implementing it yet, and so there's still. But let's actually do the work of implementing it. The second major campaign is the Boycott Chevron campaign, for the ways in which Chevron is, surprise, surprise, the vast amounts of the ways in which Chevron is Israel's main oil producer. But off the shores of Gaza are all kinds of oil fields in the water that Israel is eager to be a part of.
Also, Trump has said that Chevron has one of the first seats of the oil in Venezuela.
Absolutely. So we got Venezuela, we got Iraq, we got no war for oil on any front. And then finally, the Oakland People's Arms embargo. I don't know if you all know, but that in the port of Oakland, actually Oakland Airport is part of the port of Oakland, that weapons that the U.S. is shipping to Israel are actually flying through the Oakland Airport. And so there's this huge campaign to say we must stop this practice. I mean, we want no weapons to be sold and given to Israel, period. But at the very least, Oakland cannot be complicit in being a location through which weapons pass so that that happens. So these are three powerful campaigns, each of which you can learn more about, but each of which offers very tangible ways for you to get involved and show up at a protest, sign a petition, call your local representatives, but not just representatives. Write an op-ed in the San Francisco Chronicle or Oakland Side or any of your local. Talk to your community. There are lots of ways to engage in this. So, very last thing I want to say. A story is told, and I actually just learned this story in November, but a story is told about a journalist that was reaching out to a woman in Gaza, saying, "How are you still alive? How are you surviving? Tell me your like y'all are heroes, but how are you making this work?" And the woman, it was a young woman, she said, I know that you look at us from the outside and you think, how could we possibly live through this? And I know that you pity us. But here's the thing. You don't need to pity us. We know that we are being tested right now. We know that what is happening is wrong, and we have to rise to the occasion to meet it. And we have to do everything we can to maintain our humanity. But then she turned to the journalist and she said, "But don't your listeners know that you, too, are being tested? Will we rise to our humanity to do what we can do, to get involved? No one has to do it all. No one can do it all. But there are things that each of us can do to get involved." And so I hope this afternoon, later this morning, we'll spend some time in serious conversation about where all of this hits home for each of us and how each of us might be able to respond a little bit more fully to the call of Palestinians and the call of Palestinian Christians on the international church. Thank you.
Yeah, please. Thank you so much, Allison. We appreciate your conversation this morning. We're going to, yeah.
Boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and I believe, and you can Google it, but it is this of Palestinian civil society call to engage in nonviolent accountability and non-cooperation with Israel until Israel ends its inhumane practices.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll certainly have more time for Q&A after our break and after our small group discussion. But for now, we're going to take a 15-minute break. We'll come back together at 10:50 to continue our conversation. Thank you again, Allison. Thank you. All right, everyone, we're going to come back together into from our small groups into large group report outs and discussion and Q&A. So if everyone wants to wrap up their conversations from your small groups, we're going to come back together. Give everybody a second to get situated so we can continue our discussion. All right, so as we're coming back together, if you have something from your small group discussion that you'd like to share out with the larger group, now would be a great time to do that. It's also an opportunity if you have any questions for Allison that you'd like to ask. We can take questions, we can take comments at the same time. So I'll give folks a chance to find their seats. And I'll let you have this one. I'll run the other. Oh, okay. Great. Okay. Who has a question or a comment? I see your hand first. We'll come around.
I realize that the history of this goes back centuries, but this is on. Okay. I realize that the history goes back centuries. But maybe you could help us understand why Israel has intensified. Is it the October attacks? Is it Netanyahu? Help us understand Israel's role.
So, and this is where I think to go back to this map, the goal of Israel. This is in their documents. It's called the goal of the political goal of Israel is to create what's called Greater Israel, which is an entire Jewish country from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, devoid of Palestinians. That is their goal. And we are in a moment in time where they are in kind of the final stages of seeking to manifest that goal. Gaza, yes, Gaza is this little strip right there. And because you can see the trajectory over time, this helps us understand what's happening on the ground now and how, just looking at this, you can see where the trajectory is going. And of course, 20 years later, the amount of settlements that have been put into the West Bank is just mind-boggling. Two things are happening. One, Israel is getting away with more and more aggressive behavior, so they're going to keep doing it and they're going to keep escalating. But the other thing is that we are in a moment in time where there is international awareness and a growing resistance to what Israel is doing. So there's also real fear. There's real fear that the government of Israel sees that its popularity is declining, that its power politically is declining, and so a need to expedite their grand goals before they lose the opportunity to do that.
Allison, I thought Gaza is the little green strip on the left. Yeah, right.
Yes, Gaza is right there. Exactly. Which, again, more than half of that is already controlled by Israel now. 63% of that is completely gone from Palestinian presence.
So where's the West Bank?
So the West Bank is the other larger green. So this was the West Bank post the creation of Israel, and now it's become, they call it like Swiss cheese, because of all the settlements and have made it a non-contiguous area. And again, 20 years of expedited, you can imagine how much white and how much more the enclaves. Bantustans is the South African concept of what is happening. And again, the mass amount of gates are preventing even those little pockets from moving and accessing one another.
Other comments, questions? Sorry.
I guess I just would add to that question, why is the U.S. also increasing aid along with Israel?
What's the U.S.'s role in this? And this is really important because the U.S. needs Israel way more than Israel needs the U.S. Israel couldn't do what it's doing without the U.S., and the U.S. is actively supporting Israel. President Biden said it well. If Israel didn't exist, we would have to create it because they are our empire outpost in the Middle East. And if we want that Middle East oil, we need Israel. And increasingly, we are making connections with other oligarchies so that we won't be as reliant on Israel. The president's daughter, Ivanka, is Jewish. Is that what you're saying? But let's be clear that this is a political far more than a religious one. And that any Jewish person, like any Christian person, exists on a spectrum of how they understand what's happening and what they are supportive of or not supportive of. Oh, sorry, am I?
Is it on even? Can you hear me?
I can hear you,
Okay,
but
all right. It gets really complicated, I think, in the sense that anti-Semitism is alive and well every place. The other complicating thing is that when you look institutionally, you go back to, the high point in Spain when Christians, Jews, and Muslims were together, sharing culture, sharing knowledge. And then we had the Inquisition. The church threw all the Jews and Muslims out of Spain. The Crusades came. Like, there's a whole history of the same kind of behavior with the institutional support of pre-Reformation Christianity, which was the power. And I think that it's very difficult for institutions to acknowledge that. In the same way, in the United States, if we're going to acknowledge the decimation of indigenous people, or if you look at the church's role in that, the doctrine of discovery, until there's a real response to those things, I don't think there's going to be an institutional shift. There's going to be communities like this and what you are doing, but it's like, how do we get those shifts to happen, which will look at that map, that's 2005, this is 2026.
absolutely.
I can't imagine what it looks like now.
Exactly. Exactly. I want to address the question, Semitism is alive and well, and it's growing, and it must be stopped. And we as Christians, when you look at the perpetrators of anti-Semitism, we are absolutely really responsible. And to weaponize anti-Semitism to silence pro-Palestinian voices does a disservice to anti-Semitism and in many ways feeds into it, so that the threat of anti-Semitism has become weakened because it's used to shut people up, and so that's actually masking and preventing us from actually addressing anti-Semitism. So I think that's really important. I also want to say that the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, if you look at their numbers for the skyrocketing rise of anti-Semitism, I want to be clear that they are counting any speech that is pro-Palestinian as anti-Semitic, and that's not fair. And I also want to say, especially as we're watching MAGA conservatives challenge Israel, Many of them are doing that in very anti-Semitic ways. And what we have with the city of Richmond mayor is a good example of we need to hold Israel accountable, and we need to be challenging anti-Semitism wherever it exists. And the reason we challenge anti-Semitism is because all people are deserving of human rights. It's the same reason that we're demanding human rights for Palestinians. So we really have to come at this as a way in which any structure that diminishes the humanity, especially state structures that diminish the humanity of anyone, is what we're against and what we're called to intervene to the extent that we can. And then finally, we may not be able to stop the genocide, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, but we must do what we can. We must do what we can, not just for Palestinians, but for ourselves. Our humanity is at stake. Our Christianity is at stake. International law is at stake. And so even in this country, we may not be able to stop the rise of fascism. We may not be able to stop the rise of ISIS's inhumane, militant murders with impunity. But we have to do what we can to say that's wrong and to challenge it. That's our role.
Because that one's too quiet. Yeah. All right. I saw a couple hands back here. I'll get you after. Yeah.
I may have misheard you, but earlier on you said Zionism, and then you iterated like Christian Zionism. Did you say Muslim Zionism? I don't know that I've ever heard that before.
So the concept of Zionism as a political reality basically is promoting Jewish supremacy. And the creation of Israel and the legitimation of Israel as a political entity that engages in settler colonialism. And Judaism has been weaponized to legitimize this. Christianity has certainly not only been weaponized, but was used to create this idea. And now increasingly increasingly in the Middle East, we are seeing a rise of Muslim understandings of support of Israel to continue its settler colonial project. And Hatem Bazian, if you know him in the Bay Area, he's spoken a lot about he's the resource that I would turn to. But even at Kairos Palestine, there was this very clear all forms of religious extremism that support the superiority of one group over another must be challenged.
I'll just shout, what's in it for Muslims to promote Muslim Zionism?
What's in it for Muslims to promote Muslim Zionism? Anytime you see really intense oppressive conditions, there will be people that find ways to make sure that they're going to be safe, and that's often by partnering with the dominant power. We see that everywhere, and we're seeing that. I mean, even October 7th took place in a very timely way because there were going to be normalizing conversations in the UAE, UEA, right? UAE, I had it right, sorry, in the UAE. So we're watching in the Middle East, people strategically figuring out how they're going to situate themselves in the power struggles over land in the Middle East. And once again, religion is being used to legitimize that.
Just to add to that, I think a lot of the Arab countries are starting to align with Trump, and Trump being pro-Netanyahu as part of that Muslim Zionism.
Oh, I just wanted to know if you knew anything about do you know anything about the Jewish Voices for Peace?
Oh, no.
Thank you.
I was curious about the people that you met with back then. Do they have any comments about Hamas? And how do they relate to this?
So the first question, Jewish Voice for Peace. Yes, I have several partners with Jewish Voice for Peace. A member of Jewish Voice for Peace was here as part of today's gathering and conversation, and several Jewish Voice for Peace chapters and national are a part of apartheid-free communities. They are some of my primary partners in this work, especially in an interfaith connection. The question about Hamas, first of all, you need to understand that Hamas is a political party. So we can talk about the Republican Party. And in reality, there's all kinds of, what does it mean to be part of the Republican Party, and what does that mean in how you function? And Hamas has a militant arm, and Hamas has education and feeding programs and community infrastructure. You know, so what are we talking about when we talk about Hamas is one of the questions. And then often when people bring up Hamas, what they really want to talk about is the role of violence in seeking liberation. And the Palestinian Christian partners that I'm with are very focused on seeking liberation through nonviolent ways. And I want to be very clear that international law actually allows for violent responses of oppressive groups when their oppressors are so dehumanizing them, and particularly in ways that violate international law. So international law allows for some form of that. Now, how you translate that to the very particulars of October 7th bears a much longer conversation, but we also want to recognize that what we know of much like what we know about what happened to Renee Good, there are very different stories, and there are very as well, so just to name that.
Does this work? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm curious if you could pick this apart a little bit from the lens of liberation theology, because I think like when we're not imminently challenged morally, it's a little bit easier to operate off the principle of Christianity is on a different plane than politics, kind of like the give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's. But when we're facing genocide and all of these bigger issues, like where is Jesus in this? And for us, where is Jesus in this? And for us, how can we think about that?
And this is where, so first of all, I do want to highlight the Kairos Palestine document because they address that very specifically. Reverend Munther Isaac, who went viral talking about how God is in the rubble, and he has his whole book, God was born on the other side of the wall. So he's a prominent voice in recognizing that. I do want to problematize, Jesus was extremely political. I mean, turning the tables in the temple was both a religious and a political act. And he was crucified by the people in power because they were threatened by his political power. So I want to name that, and I also want to say that if in the face of genocide, we can't apply our faith to help us understand what's happening, then our faith is woefully inadequate. So I want to affirm that as well. Is that one more? And there was one that came up earlier that I did want to address, but say your question.
Okay. This word conflation, I want to look at that, if possible, because we have it on our TV all the time. And I think all that we're learning today about what we're learning can relate to our country right now. And so one of it, as far as journalism goes, telling both sides of the story, blah, 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 neither side gets it correct in the sense because one is equalized to the other, and in many cases, I would not say that they're equal in importance or whatever. So I would like to ask you, how do we address looking at both sides without conflation and come out alive?
So that was actually the question. So this is perfect. A few things. One, where we get our news is extremely important. Okay? And we're seeing that right now. Again, you just mentioned Renee Good, and that's writ large. Are you going to trust the president? Are you going to trust Kristi Noem? Are you going to trust the governor of Minnesota? Are you going to trust the videos that are going around? So that, and I also want to go on record saying that no president every president since the creation of Israel has been pro-Israel. Our politicians, by and large, are pro-Israel. Our media, by and large, is pro-Israel. Quite frankly, the Christian faith, by and large, is pro-Israel. So we're already starting with, unless you are actively working to get alternative news, you will be fed a pro-Israel narrative. And I like to, as a white person who seeks to draw the parallel between racism is so in the water in this country, that unless I'm actively working daily to become anti-racist, I'm engaging in more and more racism. Like there's something that we need to be doing to challenge that. Now then this comes to the question of this idea that are there two sides that are worth listening to? And if so, how do we get to those, right? I want to say yes and no. The Kairos Palestine document talked very clearly about not conflating both sidesism. And in saying that, I want you to imagine talking about Jim Crow apartheid. Do you want to give equal weight to African Americans who are living under it as Bull Connor or his supporters? Or do you want to say there can be multiple ways of understanding what's happening, but we have to listen very clearly to those who are being oppressed? If a woman says she's been sexually assaulted, are you going to give equal weight to the woman who's making that claim as the man who's claiming he didn't do it? So when it comes to trying to understand what's happening, we need to acknowledge the injustice. We need to acknowledge whose voices are silenced again and again and again, how we can hear the story and the narrative that has been silenced, and then how we can fit that into the larger narrative that we're hearing right now. I also want to say that in the Jewish community, there is a broad spectrum of how to think about and how to understand Israel. In Christianity, there's a broad spectrum of how to think about and how to understand Israel. So again, who are you talking to hear a perspective? And it's not that you can't hear different perspectives, but be very clear about the power dynamics and be very clear about what different people have to gain from the narrative that they're using.
Please join me in thanking again Reverend Allison Tanner. Thank you. Yes. We can close it out. Okay, so we're going to close out with some announcements, and then we'll be graced with a benediction to close us out as well. So first off, I want to thank everybody who is participating as a volunteer, making Women in Conversation happen. There are a lot of you. Give a little wave or stand if you're a part of the volunteer group. There's a lot of folks involved. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. And also, there's room for more. So if you would be interested in taking on a role, please come talk to anybody who just waved. After today, we have roles for everything from communications to tech support. We could use some additional hands-on to helping set up, helping get the word out, those kinds of things. So let us know if you'd like to get more involved in ways small or large. There's something to fit your availability. Elaine, where did Elaine go? Oh, it's so glary. Do you want to talk about the Google group?
Well, I've been
trying to monitor the email list more carefully as you sign up so that I'm not spending hours afterwards not entering people twice or calling you or emailing you, trying to email you if I can't read your handwriting. So only put your email address down if you're not getting the Women in Conversation emails, which means you're not on the list. Then if you're not on the list and you did write your name down, please check that I could read it. That Joe Blow on the next block could read it. And also, and I didn't notice this today, but if you have one of the real modern endings for your email, like at Richard's, like that, our old system is not going to accept it. But I think I saw almost everybody was Gmail or Hotmail, and we can do that. Thank you.
And then we also wanted to just highlight finance update. You should have seen emails going out from Concha about ways to do your $40 dues to Women in Conversation if you're able. You can do that through a link that's been emailed around. There's a QR code, and doing it that way through PushPay is the best way to do it. Yeah.
I heard the question and I had the question. Is this the new cycle of the $40, or when does the new cycle start if we remember paying it at some point in our lives?
Yeah, we're in our 25-26 year right now. So, yeah, so we collect for the year. Yeah. Right, exactly. No, yeah. Yeah, it's not, yeah. We run September through May, so in sometime in that period, we're asking for dues. Yeah, great. You had another.
Thank you to all those who waved and who helped set up. If when we're done here, if you are in or near a brown chair and are able, it would be helpful if you could bring it or one near you back into the room. That's obvious how you do that, if you can do that. And the other, this is my usual announcement, you won't be surprised. If you brought food, please take it home. I mean, if it's available to be taken home. There's nobody here. The students are gone for another week and a half. So even the students are not going to eat it. So please, and it really doesn't get eaten. I don't need to tell you all that stuff. I say it every month. But if you brought food, please take it home. Thank you.
Good reminder. Thank you. We also wanted to highlight our upcoming Women in Conversation events. Marie's going to come up to talk about the March event, I believe. And then we also have bookmarks at the back of the room. If you haven't gotten one of those, Susan has them that has the schedule for the year. Do you want me to talk about it? You good?
I didn't know I was going to, if I could say two things. Last year we had a speaker come up, or two speakers from a group called Braver Angels. And they get people from both sides of both political parties, or however many political parties you want. They get them together to talk about a topic. They know the topic ahead of time. They come, they build bridges. And so we are going to have a member from their group come and speak to us in March about building bridges with concrete ways of speaking, ways of, things to say, things that maybe if you say are really not helpful, that you may not, just a different perspective. So more ways of building bridges. And March. We'll see you in March about that one. Braver Angels.
Thank you, Marie. Yeah, that is coming up on March 15th. And then our concluding event of this year's series is going to be on May 9th. That will be coming back to some of the themes we were exploring today, becoming peacemakers, women's faith and action in the Holy Land. Our very own Ellen Baker is now there with a group of 8 called Women as Peacemakers. So they're meeting with Jewish, Muslim, and Christian women in the West Bank, Jerusalem, and Galilee. And some of these women will be our panelists at our May meeting. And then I understand, Linda, did you want to share a little bit about your announcement as well, please?
For the past several years, Epworth United Methodist Church has been participating in what we call Bethlehem Ministries. And it is St. Joseph's Center, which is managed by the Dominican Sisters, West Bank. And was talking last year with Father Xavier about it, and just before Christmas, he said that he would like to have this ministry also. So Doug Smith, who is the one who organized it at Epworth, and I met with Father Xavier just before Christmas, and Father Xavier asked Doug to prepare a brochure, which he did, and which is available at the table as you come in to Newman. So if you want to know more about the Bethlehem ministries that we've been involved in, they feed children, they run classes, they have a daycare center, because the economy of Bethlehem has been destroyed because it was totally dependent on people coming at Christmas and buying all the stuff they made during the year. Well, not a lot of visitors to Bethlehem these days. So anyway, if you want to know more about that and Newman's involvement, just pick up the brochure. Thank you.
Are you connected with the people that sell the Palestinian olive oil? Can we still get some? All right. Is there a way that we can put up so everybody knows about that?
Yes, their contact information is on this sheet.
All right, good, because the olive oil is fabulous. So I'll just say that. Okay.
Excuse me. Where did, oh, okay. I'm gonna, why don't you go next and we'll come around.
Okay.
We're doing some more announcements.
All right, this might be new to everybody, but I think the question of how, Allison, we get the word out further. 2 documentaries have been nominated for Academy Awards this year. One of them is Leah. If you remember the story of the little girl that was in the the car waiting, and then the ambulance was bombed and she was killed. The other one is the voice of Hind Rajab, who's one of the Israeli women, Jewish women, who was kidnapped. And she and her husband had been critics of Israel, of their own country, and very articulate. And I did watch kind of the trailers for it, and talking about getting those 2 perspectives out to a much, much wider world. I think it's really important that we see them when we can, that we pay attention to the Academy Awards, and we'll have a way to talk, one more way to talk with other people who might not be interested before.
Thank you.
Okay, the movie of Hind Rajab is playing at the Roxy Theater in San Francisco today and tomorrow. The one that that got a 25-minute ovation at the Venice Film Festival. They got a standing ovation for 23 minutes standing ovation at the Venice Film Festival, and is playing at the Roxy in San Francisco today at 3 o'clock and tomorrow at noon. But I wanted to remind everybody about Dr. Greg Shea, a parishioner at St. Joseph's in Alameda, and a pediatrician, pulmonary pediatric doctor. He will be speaking here at Newman. He belongs to Med Global, which is a international group of doctors that go to conflict areas. He's been to many conflict areas all over the world, and he's been 3 times to Gaza. Most recently, he will speak about his experiences in Gaza here at Newman, Monday night, the 26th of. Please come and bring your friends to hear the reality of what the medical staff has to deal with in Gaza, and his love for children is just palpable. As we know, Israel has recently disallowed several international organizations, including Doctors Without Borders, has been barred now. They can't go to Gaza. So please come the 26th. And Allison will be here too. Yeah, she's coming. And she's going to have a few words to say too. Please come the 26th, 7 o'clock, Monday night, here. It'll be in the chapel. So dress warmly.
Thank you, Vivian. And one last, well, maybe not last, but a flyer. I only had a few up here. February 14th, here at Newman, 9 to 12, Pax Christi, Northern California, will have our 4th annual Peacemaker Award. And our speaker is Ann Simons-Bucher, who is the Canticle Farms woman. Read about her. And then we are presenting the Peacemaker Award to our friend at St. Columba and this community, Maurice Harper. So we would really love to see you all come. It'll be here February 14th. Still allows you time for your romantic evening that evening if you're still doing that. And but in the morning, how about starting off a day of love with Pax Christi, Northern California? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other closing announcements before we close in prayer? Okay, great. Reverend, would you like to close us out, please?
Yes, and I was asked to make one more announcement, which is that in the handout that I gave you, there is, I'm doing a 3-part Bible study on the Kairos Palestine document the next 3 Tuesday nights. It's virtual. If anyone is interested, simply email me. My email is on this form, so if you need to email me for follow-up questions, or you want to see my little Bethlehem store in my house, or you want to sign up for the Bible study and get the Zoom link, use that email for any of those purposes. And now let us pray. God of love and liberation, guide us as we seek to follow your ways. God of freedom and justice and equality, empower us with your Spirit to act as we are able, to do what we can, to speak, to listen, to share, to show up. God, as we pray, so often your kingdom come, your will be done. May it be so, and may we do our part that it may be so. Amen.